And House Republicans are divided over House Speaker Mike Johnson's foreign aid plan, with a vote expected as soon as this Saturday. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez brings us the latest.
It's been over 60 days since the Senate approved its $95 billion supplemental aid package for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine. Since then, House Republican leaders had drawn a line that they would not consider any foreign aid unless border security was addressed first. Now, Speaker Johnson is under fire for presenting a foreign aid package without border security provisions.
So I'm disappointed that we're not putting border security. It's a huge problem.
Are you going to vote in favor of Ukraine aid?
I'm not sure yet. It depends what is going to end up. I support only lethal aid.
I spoke with Congressman Eric Burleson, the Republican from Missouri, and he said he would not support the Speaker's plan unless H.R. 2, the border security bill that passed the House of Representatives last year, is included in the package.
House Resolution 2 or H.R. 2, if that bill was fully on the Ukraine supplemental, I would consider it. The American people deserve to know where their lawmakers stand, where their senators stand when it comes to their position on the border.
Some House Republicans, like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene or Congressman Tom Massey, have asked the Speaker to either resign or face a motion to vacate. Others, like Representative Van Orden or Representative Mike Waltz, have defended the Speaker on strategic grounds.
The obstructionist, the minority of the Republican Party better pay attention, because we're over it. We are done. We came here to govern. We came here to legislate. A lot of those folks came here to get on television.
Now is the absolute wrong time to send the House into chaos.
Some Freedom Caucus members have also rejected the idea of increasing the threshold needed to activate a motion to vacate the speakership. Currently, only one congressman is needed to activate a motion to oust Speaker Johnson.
I'm opposed to that. The Speaker serves at the pleasure of the membership. A strong, confident leader is not concerned about being in that position.
Speaker Johnson has already expressed that he expects support from Democrats in order to move his plan forward.
I don't have all my Republicans who agree on that rule, and that means the only way to get a rule on the floor is that it requires a couple of Democrats.
It is expected that the House of Representatives will vote on 4 standalone legislations this Saturday. A bill for Ukraine, a bill for Israel, a bill for Taiwan, and a 4th bill containing Republican priorities. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And to discuss Speaker Johnson's foreign aid plan, we had a chance to speak with Chair of the Freedom Caucus, Congressman Bob Good, who also recently introduced a bill aimed at countering Iran and Communist China's human rights violations. Congressman Bob Good, thank you so much for taking a moment for us.
Great to be with you, Steve. Thanks.
Speaking of your busy schedule, you get the 4 bills now, individual, one for Taiwan, one for Israel, one for Ukraine, and then a sidecar bill, as they're calling it. Where do you stand? Help us understand all of these bills, how they come into play.
Well, it's a major disappointment. They're trying to borrow $100 billion nearly, send it overseas, doing nothing to secure our border or defend our country. They're breaking their words, particularly the Speaker, who had said that we will use the supplemental bills as the leverage, particularly the interest in Ukraine from the Senate and from the Democrats, to secure our border. He refused our efforts to tie border security to these bills. He's going to pass them with predominantly Democrat votes. It will, again, borrow money that we don't have. It'll make our debt situation worse and do nothing to make America safer.
There's a lot of folks out there trying to paint the picture that the Freedom Caucus, like yourself, are trying to fight and are all about infighting with your own fellow Republicans. It sounds like what you're saying right now is that you're more focused on what you could have done to oppose what the Democrats want in these packages.
Yes, specifically, we gave the Speaker strategic options. We said, hey, let's do Israel first as a standalone. Let's jam the Senate based on the attacks that took place over the past weekend. Let's send them once again what we did in November, where we got a bipartisan vote where I think all but one Republican and 12 or 14 Democrats joined us in a $15 billion package for Israel that was paid for by cutting the IRS expansion. Send that over there and make the Senate choose between joining us in supporting Israel or refusing to cut any spending to do it, or refusing to support Israel just because it didn't have Ukraine aid. We also, Steve, gave a solution for Ukraine. We said, let's, while most of us don't support additional aid for Ukraine, let's do a skinny down, maybe $20 billion version that's paid for, again, cutting something, but let's tie border security to it. So the Democrats don't get their Ukraine money unless they join us in forcing the numbers down at the border, not even having policy necessarily that, hey, a promise to secure the border for an unlawful administration that doesn't care about the border and doesn't care about the law, but literally tell them they don't get the money until the numbers come down to a manageable number like they were during the Trump administration.
So you just introduced some legislation focused on Iran, and you also tied in human rights to that. Iran, China, human rights when it comes to the Uyghurs. Tell us about this legislation.
Well, what we're trying to do is make it difficult for the Biden administration to get us in a bad nuclear deal with Iran. They'll at least say you've got to sever your cash and your strategic connections to China. You've got to stop persecuting the Uyghurs, or make sure that China stops persecuting the Uyghurs in order for you to have a nuclear agreement, and putting that responsibility on Iran to help us lobby against that, and that to have any nuclear agreement with Iran would have to be ratified by the Senate as an official treaty, so that John Kerry or Tony Blinken and Joe Biden can't do it without the approval of the Senate.
Congressman Good, when it comes to China, a lot of people overlook them often when you're talking about the Middle East, whether it's Hamas or Iran, but they're actually a state sponsor of terrorism.
They absolutely are.
And so how important was it to include China in this bill?
Critically important, because essentially China is helping to fund Iran. They've recently done a deal that's 25 years, $400 billion. They're buying a tremendous amount of oil and petroleum now from Iran, so it's helping to enrich Iran. And where does that money go? We know where it goes. It goes to attack Israel. It goes to attack our strategic interests around the world. It goes to attack terrorism around the world. China is our #1 enemy, really, on the world stage. We're being weakened under this administration, and China is taking advantage of that.
Congressman Bob Good, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be with you. Appreciate it.
On the third day of his campaign swing through Pennsylvania, President Biden is receiving endorsements from the Kennedy family. That's as third-party wildcard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running a campaign that could ultimately tip the 2024 election to former President Trump's favor. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao brings us more from Philadelphia.
Over a dozen members of the Kennedy family endorsed President Biden at his campaign event right here in Philadelphia. And that's a rebuke to one of their own, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the independent candidate whom Biden's campaign worries could take votes away from President Biden and tip the 2024 elections toward former President Trump. Both Biden and Carrie Kennedy, one of RFK Jr.'s sisters, directing their fire not so much at RFK Jr. himself, but at the ultimate target, Trump.
I can only imagine how Donald Trump's outrageous lies and behavior would have horrified my father. Daddy stood for equal justice, for human rights, and freedom from want and fear, just as President Biden does today.
And President Biden again doubling down on portraying former President Trump as a threat to democracy, citing some comments by Trump that Trump said were often taken out of context.
And as mentioned already, he promised to be a dictator on day one, his own words. And he calls for another bloodbath when he loses again.
Meanwhile, RFK Jr. responded to his family's new endorsements for Biden, saying he's pleased to see it as it shows that people like he and his family can still be divided in opinions, but united in love for each other. He further used it to promote his campaign message of, quote, healing America. And Trump, meanwhile, has called RFK Jr. a radical left, citing his views on climate change and abortion. Still, RFK Jr. is polling at 13% in a Fox News poll last month, proving that he can still be a threat to both candidates, or like himself put it earlier last month, that he wants his campaign to be a spoiler for both Biden and Trump. Reporting from Philadelphia, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.